everybody, and welcome to a doubly special edition of Quarantine Cooking. As it turns out, we're expecting a really big winter storm here in this part of the country, and so it's going to hit sometime around the evening, right about the time that I would be doing this cooking class. So I wanted to bump it up earlier. So I know that a lot of you are not going to be able to watch this live. However, it'll be right here on our Facebook page in perpetuity for as long as you would like to see it. And I will make sure that it gets up on our Facebook or on our YouTube channel as well, and also on the Plant-Based Priest website, so that you will have plenty of opportunity to watch all of these great holiday dishes that we're preparing today. So what are we making today? We're going to start with dessert because it takes the longest to bake. So we're going to make some plant-based chocolate peppermint cupcakes. Very excited about that. We're also going to be making a hot water crust savory pie with a really delicious filling that I'll be telling you all about. And we're also going to make some animal product-free latkes, so no eggs in those. And I'll show you how we're going to do that as well. So let's get started with our cupcakes. This is a chocolate mint cupcake. Let me make sure my speaker or my microphone is on. Just want to make sure. Okay, we're good to go. So I can't hear you, but you can hear me, which is probably just as well. So to start with our cupcakes, we have all of our dry ingredients right here. And it is a 1 1/4 cups of flour, 1 1/4 cups of sugar, 1/2 cup of cocoa powder, just the unsweetened kind, 1/2 teaspoon of baking soda, and 1/2 teaspoon of baking powder, and also 1/2 teaspoon of salt. So all of that is in this bowl right here, and we're just going to whisk it together so that all of these dry ingredients are combined. And be careful with the cocoa because, man, once you start messing with that, it just puffs up everywhere. So if you're doing this in a mixer, especially be careful, because if you're going at high speed, it just poof, goes everywhere. But we don't want to do this one in a mixer because when you work with plant-based cake batters and things like that, you don't want to beat it up too much because the leavening is completely different. We're not using eggs or butter to lighten this up at all. It's relying solely on the baking soda and baking powder and on something special with the wet ingredients, and I'll show you what. So we have about 1 1/3 cups of oat milk here, but you can use soy or almond as well. And then what we're going to add to this that is going to help with the leavening action, or what makes it fluffy and raised up, is a tablespoon of apple cider vinegar. When you add the vinegar to the milk like this, it curdles and makes it like a plant-based buttermilk, which is a really handy thing because the acids in the milk and in the vinegar, especially once they're combined, will react with the baking soda that's in the dry ingredients, and that's really going to help it get fluffy. So the fluffiness is not going to come from beating up eggs the way you would with a regular cake, or from just egg whites or something like that. It's going to come from light mixing, but mostly the baking powder and also the reaction of the vinegar and the baking soda. So it's kind of interesting the way that all works. To these wet ingredients, we're also going to add 1/3 cup of oil, unflavored oil, light oil. This is canola oil. Regular vegetable oil would work, avocado oil would work. Just stay away from olive oil or other stuff that might impart a flavor that doesn't go all that well with chocolate and peppermint. So there's our plant-based milk, we have our vinegar in there, we have our oil in there, and then we're going to add a teaspoon of vanilla extract. I'm going to set this aside also for our frosting later. So a teaspoon of vanilla and a 1/2 teaspoon of peppermint extract. Peppermint is not my very favorite flavor in the world, but I do like a little hit of it along with some chocolate, and it's very festive and holiday oriented, so I think it's appropriate. So here's our peppermint extract and just a 1/2 teaspoon of that, so not overpowering. Okay, there's that, and that's also going to go in our frosting later. So we'll whisk the wet ingredients together, and that vinegar along with the milk has made a nice curdle. I know it doesn't sound very appealing, but believe me, it is. So we're going to pour, oh, it smells very pepperminty, very nice. A little goes a long way with most of your extracts, so make sure you follow the recipe. I always put in a little bit of extra vanilla because vanilla is such a gentle flavor anyway. But with other flavors that are stronger like lemon, almond, peppermint, be careful because otherwise it can overpower everything else. So I'm whisking very gently, and I'm not going to really beat this too much. I'm going to combine all of the ingredients and make sure that they're all mixed up, but I'm not going to make sure that it's absolutely smooth, because really what we don't want to do is, especially with something as delicate as this plant-based batter is, we don't want to beat down all of the bubbles that are being created. And we also don't want to develop any of the gluten that's in the flour, because then you get something that's chewy and tough rather than light and fluffy. So I just barely mixed all that. There are a couple of little lumps in there, which personally drive me crazy, but it works. Okay. Our oven is preheated to 350 degrees. And we have 12 cupcake liners ready to be filled with our cupcake batter. So where's my quarter cup? Oh, my quarter cup is in here. Let me rinse that out. Okay. So here is a quarter cup. And we're going to start just by filling a quarter cup each. You want the cupcake batter to come up about half of the way. So a little bit less than a quarter cup per cupcake liner. So I can tell by looking at this batter that it is very fluffy. That's good. That's what we want. We want to make sure that that reaction from the light whisking that it got, and also the reaction of the baking soda and the vinegar, are going to make them very nice and fluffy. Okay. Just going to fill each one of these up. As I said, the oven is set to 350 degrees. And these bake for about 20 to 25 minutes. With my oven, I always go for the lesser amount of time because my oven runs kind of hot. And I have not yet taken the time to get one of those thermometers that you stick on the inside to test how accurate it really is. I have the feeling it's not terribly accurate, I will tell you that, because, you know, I tend to think if I leave things in for even slightly over the lesser amount of time stated on a recipe, my stuff tends to get a little overcooked. So I try and be very careful. I don't want it to be underbaked. I've been watching so much of the Great British Baking Show lately that every time I bake now, I have Paul Hollywood or Prue What's-Her-Name's voice in my head saying, "Oh dear, it would have been lovely, but it's a bit underproved. Oh dear, well, it's a bit underbaked." And so I'm trying to avoid the voice of British reason, baking reason that is, in my head saying that I haven't done it quite right, because that's just a tragedy. It would be a tragedy for me. If you have not watched that show, by the way, I encourage you to. It is so much fun to watch, and it's an especially fun challenge for those of us who have alternative ways of cooking, because it kind of helps you to look things up and think, well, if it works with this animal-based product like milk or eggs or butter, how can I make it work with something that is plant-based? It's a great challenge and lots of fun, and also it's just so much fun to watch. The people are so talented. These are just home bakers who do amazing things. Very good. Very chocolatey and very minty. I like it. And you can feel on your tongue how light the batter is. So we're going to go ahead and put these in the oven, and I'm going to set the timer for 20 minutes. Okay. And now we're going to move on to the hot water crust. So again, British Baking Show, I have been deeply influenced by the British Baking Show because hot water pastry is not something I had really ever heard of. And it is, I found out, primarily a British Isles sort of concoction made from, kind of popularized when they were making great big towering savory pies for medieval feasts and things like that. And you can make it very tough, not tough like texturally tough, but very strong. And you can also decorate with it. If it tears while you're rolling it out, you can patch it up without worrying about it falling apart. It is a very strong pastry dough. The exchange that you have for that is that it's more grainy and crumbly when you fork into it than flaky, and that's just cooking science. When you make a regular pie dough, you've got your dry flour and you add your fat to it, butter or shortening or margarine or lard, and you mix it with the tips of your fingers or with the pastry cutter because you're trying to coat a lot of those grains of flour with fat from the fat that you're using. And then you add very cold water and mix it just a tiny little bit because you're trying not to disturb the fat and melt it, so that when you roll it out, you have these pockets of fat in amongst the flour that has not melted. When you put it in a hot oven, when it does melt, it's cold and then it hits high heat and it puffs out. And so not only does it get crispy because of the fat content, but the steam from that fat kind of cooking right away creates those flaky layers that we like so much in a pie crust. This is different. So the hot water, and I'm going to start this water boiling now while I'm explaining how all this works. I've got some simmering water over here that's about to be hot water, or boiling water. So what happens is when hot water hits the flour, the fat is already incorporated and melted into this hot water, and I'll show you what that looks like in just a minute when our water is boiling. But there are a couple of different things that happen. So the hot water hits the starch in the flour and makes it swell up and gelatinize, which I know you don't think of most starches as being gelatin-like. Gelatin's a separate term. But as a cooking term, as a science term, what that means is it gets very soft and goopy. That's why if you mash up potatoes too much with too much liquid, they get gooey and goopy rather than fluffy and light. That's because those starches have absorbed a lot of the liquid. You've broken the cell walls of the starch, and so it's gotten very jelly-like and goopy. We're not going to go quite that far with the starch molecules in the flour, but the hot water is going to penetrate them and make them fluff out, and that makes them strong. In addition to that, the fat is going to coat it a lot more thoroughly than if you were rubbing it in or using a pastry cutter into the flour. And so that's going to make it very watertight or liquid tight. So if you've got a filling for a pie that has a lot of meat juice in it or vegetable juice in it or other kind of liquid in there that would kind of break through or soak a regular pie crust, it won't do it to this. It's already wet. So I'm going to get a fork first. And what we have in here is 1.5 cups of regular flour and 1/2 cup of bread flour and just a pinch of salt. So make sure all of that is mixed up together. And the bread flour, all that means is it's a harder flour, and so it's going to make that crust even stronger than if you were using all regular all-purpose flour. So once we've got that mixed up, I'm going to make sure that we've got some good space cleared out because we're going to have to roll this dough out. And that's another unique thing about this. You roll it out while it is still warm. Unlike regular pie crust where you want to make sure it's cold, cold, cold before you do anything to it, it all stays very warm during the whole process. So our water is starting to boil. And I'm going to bring you over to the stove so that you can see how this is going to work. The other thing I'm going to show you how to do is how to measure solid shortening. So it's a real pain to get solid shortening into and then out of a cup all by itself. So I'm going to show you, in case you don't already know, the water displacement method of measuring out solid shortening. So I have a cup measure, a big one here, that the water is at 1 cup. What I'm going to do, I need 1/2 cup of this shortening. So what I'm going to do is get some of this together. Try and make it as solid a lump as I can, and I'm going to push that into the water where it floats. But while it floats, it also pushes that water up and out of the way and brings up the level. When I have this level of water up to 1.5, then I will know that I have enough shortening. So I'm just going to keep kind of pushing that in there, flipping it all in, checking, almost. And because it's a fat and therefore water resistant, once I do have the fat in there that I need, which is right now, all I have to do, I didn't soak up any of the water, so I can just pour that water out, and it's ready to go into the boiling water that's on the stove. Of course, now I have shortening under my fingernails, but it still takes a little bit less time, and it's slightly more accurate than trying to measure it into a measuring cup and then scoop it all out again. So I'm going to turn up the heat. In addition to this half cup of shortening, I have a half cup of margarine. The original recipe, of course, calls for butter and lard, but I just thought for a plant-based cooking class that probably was not the way to go. So I'm not going to do that. I've got margarine, and it's a decent quality baking margarine, and I've got the half cup of shortening. So my water is starting to come to a boil, so I'm going to put the margarine in. And the margarine, you could use all shortening, but the margarine, the baking margarine, is going to give it a nice buttery flavor in the crust. And then there goes my shortening. Okay. So that water is boiling, and we're going to incorporate the fat into that boiling water and make sure that it all gets melted in there. And just so you know, I did have that margarine sitting out for a little while so that it got soft and would melt more quickly. Okay. So heat is high, just making sure that all of our fat is completely melted. You don't want any solid chunks in there. Okay, almost there. It's a beautiful bright yellow color from that baking margarine, so that's nice. Plant-based butter, whatever you want to call it. Almost there. It's a nice, rich, it's very thick from all of the fat that's in there. I started experimenting with this when I saw, again, all of the contestants making these big, fancy, very structurally sound pies with this hot water crust. I'm not very good at making pie crust, and I thought, I wonder if hot water pie crust is the secret. Turns out, I don't know if it's the secret, but it is a secret for sure. Okay, I'm going to turn my camera back over here so you can see what I'm doing, I hope. So here we have this nice hot mixture of water and fat. Using a fork, I'm making a little well in the center of this flour mix. Okay? All of this goes in all at once. So all of that boiling water and boiling fat right into the middle. And I'm going to take a fork and stir it all up until it absorbs all of that hot water and all of that melted fat that's in there. And that's how we make a good, strong dough. Take my rings off too, because this is bound to make a mess otherwise. Probably my watch as well. Okay. Beautiful, beautiful. Now, ordinarily, when I've made these, I use a spring-form pan because I like to see how high I can get the sides without having it break. But for the purpose of this pie, I'm going to do it in a regular pie tin so you can see the process a little bit better. And also, it's very difficult for me to eat one of those all by myself, and sometimes it goes to waste. So I think a regular pie tin will create something that I'm actually capable of eating. So here is our hot water pie crust dough. I'm getting it all out of there. And I'm going to knead it briefly. I want it to hold together, but I don't want to develop the gluten. We want something that's still, it's not going to be flaky. By virtue of the way that it is made, it's not going to be flaky. However, I don't want it to be tough. It's going to be crumbly, grainy, which is fine. It's still going to have a nice, crisp texture. But if I knead it too much, it will lose that texture and get very tough and chewy. And any kind of crust, you really don't want that. So just enough so that it is all holding together. Doesn't have to be perfect. And I'm going to look at it. I'm going to kind of spread it out. I'm going to to break off about 1/3, maybe a little more, for the top part and set that aside. And with the rest of it, roll it into a ball, flatten it into a disc, just like you would regular pie crust. And then because it is warm and because it is so fatty, it rolls out best if you use pieces of parchment paper to do it. So in between 2 pieces of parchment paper with your rolling pin, and you have to kind of hold it steady for a bit because it doesn't always cooperate in the parchment. So we're going to roll it out right here. Again, don't worry about it being perfect. And when you take, I'll show you what I mean when I take it out. You can see it's already falling apart. Do not panic. You would be amazed at how well this patches up with no problems at all. So we're rolling it out about somewhere in between 1/4 of an inch and 1/8 of an inch. Okay. There's that. The other good thing is, because it is so fatty, I don't want to say greasy, but it is a little greasy. Because of that, though, you don't have to worry about greasing your pie pan. In fact, if you did, you would probably end up frying this crust rather than baking it. So it's on our parchment paper. I'm going to flip this over like that, and then flip the whole thing over like that, pull the parchment off carefully. So you can see most of it actually landed really nicely in that pie tin or pie plate. So I'm just going to kind of make sure it's tucked in. But you can also see that it tore in a couple of spots. That is okay, because you can just grab crust from somewhere else and pat it in there. And believe me when I tell you, it holds regardless of how you have patched it, and you just keep pressing it, pressing it, pressing it until you have all your bare spots covered. And if you have little cracks in there, you can just press them together, and you can even reinforce them with a little bit more of this dough. When I first did this, it was in the biggest springform pan I have, and it just completely, I think it covered the bottom more or less intact, but the sides were completely shattered. And I went ahead, I said, okay, they say you can keep going, you can patch it up and keep going, so we'll see what happens. And I put a pretty heavy filling in there. It was the same kind of mushroom and nut mixture that we're going to use today, but also pureed butternut squash and mashed potatoes with and then a kind of a mixture of vegetables with some gravy, some plant-based gravy. It was pretty substantial, and when I took it out of the oven, I let it cool for a bit, and I popped open the springform, kind of holding my breath, and I'll be darned, but every single patch on those sides held like a dream. So I'm just going to trim off what's around the edges here. Okay. So you can see there's a bit of a patch job on here, but that's fine. It's really not going to affect it. You can see it, but it really doesn't make much of a difference. So finish trimming off these edges here. You can see how crumbly it is, and when it's baked, it really has kind of a similar texture, just drier. So I'm going to set that part aside, scoop all that out of the way. Don't need that, but we'll save it just in case the top falls apart and we don't have enough. And then we'll roll out this other batch. Whoops! Well, luckily that landed right side up. So here's that. Okay. So just like we did with that first one, rolling it out, to about a quarter to an 1/8 of an inch thick. almost there. Now before we put this on, we should probably put something into our pie crust, and I'll tell you what that's going to be. So I put together what I've kind of come to think of as my all-purpose not meat mix. So this is that mushroom, ground up mushroom and pecans that have been soaked. And what I did this time was I added a little bit of ground fennel seed. Fennel seed, to our palate, for those of us who have eaten meat before, it reads a lot like sausage or like other kinds of meat. So it'll kind of have that reminiscent meaty feeling, along with a little bit of liquid smoke, some smoked paprika, a little bit of Italian seasoning, shallots, onions, garlic, carrots, and peas. So we have a nice stout mixture here. It's not too wet because I did cook it, because you want to get as much moisture out of those mushrooms as you can without making it completely dry. So this is a nice, soft, moist mixture of those mushrooms and pecans, and then again, onions, shallots, carrots, and peas, and all of those delicious seasonings. It really does taste wonderful. So this is sort of like our faux mincemeat pie, right? Mushrooms, pecans, vegetables, very tasty. Spread that into the pie crust as the pie filling there. Just perfect amount. Hooray! And then you do the same thing with our top crust. So just lay it right on top. Then peel off that parchment. Okay, big part ripped off. That is just fine, so we can patch it up. Just keep it going there. It is all right. Okay. It's a little trickier to patch it up when it's touching the filling like that, but we're going to manage. We always do. Roll this out just a little. Just pinch it on there and press it very lightly down into that dough. Cover up some of those cracks, try and blend it in. Since it's a soft dough, it is a little easier to blend it with your fingertips into the dough that's surrounding it. It's not going to look perfect, but it's going to hold together. I'm just going to crimp the edges the same way I would on any pie. And that will keep it together even a little more. Side benefit is it's making all the stuff on the edges fall off, so I won't have to trim it as much. You can tell by my technique that I'm not the world's authority on making pie. And honestly, when it comes to sweets, I would much rather have cake or brownies or muffins. I love savory pies, like pot pies of any kind, like tamale pies when you're doing this, but with kind of a cornbread crust. But sweet pies, they have never been my thing. So right through the top, just going to cut some vents. And how fortuitous is it that our cupcakes are just about ready to come out right when our pie has to go in. So speaking of, let's get a cooling rack out for them and get them set up. They can cool off right here, I think. I've been so busy with you all doing this pie crust for these past few minutes, I haven't even looked in on the cupcakes. I wonder how they are doing. We're about to find out. I'm just kind of patting down some of those extra crumbs along the edges. Beautiful. You can see it's a little rustic looking, as they would say on the Great British Baking Show, mostly because of the patching that had to be done on that side. If I had rolled it out a little bit more, probably would have had better luck there. But again, it's the taste that matters. Style, substance over style. Let's look at this substance. Oh my goodness! These are perfect! Look at these beautiful, fluffy cupcakes. Are they not lovely? Let's have a little close-up here. Look! They rose up beautifully. Thank you, vinegar. Thank you, baking soda. So let's let's set those to cool. And now that those are out, our pie goes in. And now that the pie is in, we're going to give those cupcakes time to cool off. And in the meantime, I'm going to get some of this stuff out of the way so that we can now make our latkes. Very excited about those. So latkes, for those of you who don't know, are potato pancakes. And there are a number of different ways to make them. Some of you might know that I grew up in a Jewish household, and we were a coarse shredded family. So thickly shredded or grated potatoes. And one of the joys of my mother's life was finally getting a food processor when I was a kid. That was when I think Cuisinart started becoming much more widely available, and she really, really wanted one, not least for the fact that every year at Hanukkah, she was hand grating potatoes enough to feed 5 people latkes. So she was hand grating potatoes and onions every year until we were old enough, my sisters and I were old enough to help her. And then finally, she got a food processor, and she was so happy because it made her life, for a lot of reasons, but especially during Hanukkah, a lot easier. Now, there were also people whom we knew that did fine ground potatoes, like not shredded, but almost, I wouldn't say pureed, but certainly a lot more finely grated than what we were used to. And they always seemed so weird to us because we like the stout texture, right, of heartier latkes. Give me just a second over here. Just making sure everybody can hear. Okay. I'm going to move this just slightly so you can get a better angle. Okay. So what I did earlier was I did grate up a couple of potatoes and about half an onion. I'm not making a huge batch here, but I have them in a colander in a dish towel. That's because they're going to drain, even more so in about 1 second, they're going to drain out a lot of water, which is what we want. Otherwise you get soggy potato pancakes, and nobody likes soggy potato pancakes. So I'm going to roll this up like that. And then I don't think you can see me if I go over to the sink, so I'm just going to go ahead and do it in the bowl here. So once I have in a dish towel all of the potatoes and onions rolled up, I am going to squeeze the ever-loving life out of them, or just the water anyway, because we do not want soggy, watery latkes. That is a depressing thing. It is not a thing of beauty. It's a thing of shame and sadness. And that's not what the holiday is about. It's about joy and victory and God's saving power. And if God can save the oil, he can help us save the potatoes. And that's what we're doing. So you see all of that water that's coming out? When you cook these latkes, if you didn't get all of that out, what you would have is they would all be coming out in the pan when you tried to cook them. And it would be, as I said, a very sad affair. So that's a fair amount right there. Dump that out. Okay. But the good thing is you've kept most of the starch. And the starch is going to be very handy when you make these for them to stick together, in addition to a binding agent. So if you are making regular style, not plant-based latkes, what you're going to use as a binding agent is going to be egg. We're not going to use that. Instead, we're going to use something, I wouldn't say I've just discovered it, but I've just started working with it, something called aquafaba. Aquafaba meaning bean water, more or less, but specifically the water that comes from cooked chickpeas. It is very, very thick, very, very starchy, and it is a wonderful egg substitute. You can even make a plant-based meringue out of it if you believe that. I did do it. It was really amazing. So you can either drain canned chickpeas, or you can use the liquid that you have saved from cooking chickpeas yourself. So about 3 tablespoons of aquafaba is equal to 1 egg. So we're going to start with 1 aquafaba egg and add a little bit of flour, and of course salt, and of course pepper. So we have our egg substitute in there. Dust it with some salt, a good bit of salt, lots and lots of fresh black pepper, lots. Love a good peppery latke. Okay, and then A little dusting of flour to help keep it together. You can also use matzo meal, which is what my mom usually did. So just dusting it a little bit with flour on the top. And this is one of those things where you got to get your hands in. Wow. Okay, so I have not used aquafaba with latkes before, but it works really, really well. It's sticking together. The starch in the potatoes helps. The starch in the flour also helps. I'm coming across some pieces of onion and potato that didn't get entirely shredded up. Some people like that. I like to break them down a little bit. I'm going to add just a tiny bit more, maybe 1 more tablespoon of the aquafaba to make sure it really holds together. Okay, perfect. All right. I don't like adding too much flour because it doesn't cook for very long, and I don't like a floury taste. I like as much potato and onion coming through as possible. So we're going to get our pan nice and hot. I'm going to come over here and turn that so you can see the stove right there. I've got a nice big pan, and I'm going to heat it up medium high. Okay, get that out of the way. And I'm going to get for the latkes to drain on and a baking sheet to go under it because butter and beans are going to drip. We have that set up, and we're going to use just regular canola oil because it's good for pan frying things. It's got a nice high smoke point. So I'm going to wait till this pan gets good and hot before I do anything to it. Bring my potatoes over. Potatoes and onions over here. I'm running out of room. Actually, while that pan is heating up, I'm going to get these cupcakes out of their pan so they can cool in their wrappers. Ooh, they're very fluffy, very crumbly. They're going to be great. Ooh, they are very delicate. This is exciting. I don't know if you can see what I'm, no, you can't see what I'm doing over here because the camera's, I'm out of the view of the camera, but I'm just getting these little cupcakes out of their metal nest here. Ooh, that's hot. Note to self, I should have greased the cupcake pan because where the batter stuck to the pan, it makes the cupcake stick inside. So some of these are less than optimal coming out, looks-wise, but they are very light, so that's good. Ooh. Some of them are a little squished. Oh well. Hopefully they'll still taste nice. There we go. You know, if I'd let them cool a little bit longer, they probably would have come out better. The good news is, because some of it stuck to the pan, I can actually get a little preview. It tastes like regular cake. Very tasty. Very nice. A little sweet. I might knock a 1/4 cup out of that sugar, actually. All right. Okay, so our pan is getting nice and hot. Add a good bit of oil down to the bottom. Let it get good and hot in there. And the way I like to test for a pan that's hot enough to fry is just a simple crackling water test. It is hot. So I'm taking a small fistful here of our latke mixture and just patting it out very carefully, popping it right in the oil. I'm not trying to form a patty that completely holds together because even when you use eggs, it does not completely hold together. You just want it enough so that when you put it in, it's in one piece. And then as it cooks, that starch will spread out, and again, gelatinize just a little bit so that it holds together. But if you overwork this, then you just get potato mush. And again, that's not what it's about. You want a nice, crispy, flaky potato pancake. Okay. Room for one more in there, I think. A little one. All right. So we're going to let the bottoms of those cook thoroughly. You need to rearrange this one just a tiny bit. And you'll know that they're ready to flip when you can get your spatula all the way underneath, which I cannot yet do. So they need to do their thing a little while longer. In the meantime, I'll take a little peek at our pie. It hasn't been in there very long, but it's starting to look all right. Okay, so this first one that I put in, ready to flip. Okay, that's good. You can't see it from here, but it's got nice golden brown on that side that was just in the oil cooking. So it looks like it's going to be a good one. The next one that I put in, yep, it's ready. I can turn up the heat just a little bit, I think. You want it good and hot. These are fried potatoes, more or less. Further proof that plant-based does not necessarily mean healthy, just so you know. This is not necessarily healthy. To my credit, I did shred them with the skins on, and they say that's the healthiest part of the potato, so at least you got that going for you. And it is a whole food, right? You've shredded it up, but you haven't really done a whole lot of artificial additions to this. It's just potato and onion. Okay. That one didn't hold together quite as well, but we can make it work. We are making it work. These other two are frying up beautifully, beautifully. We can actually move them around a little bit, which is good. And then this last one that I put in, yep, ready to go. Lovely. Got some big chunks of potato and onion in that one. Interesting. The other good thing, and I'm going to turn it up yet even a little bit more. The other good thing about these potato latkes is if you make them with egg and you don't get them quite cooked through, then you run the risk of eating uncooked or just slightly cooked egg, which is not good for you. I've never had any problem with it, but a lot of people can and do. And the worse our meat and food industry get, the more likely you are to suffer a foodborne illness. So if you can avoid that with using something like aquafaba or some other kind of plant-based egg substitute, all the better for you and for your health and the health of your family. Okay, this one's starting to do it. Okay, now we're starting to reach hot enough oil. I may have put them in a bit too soon, but now we're really going here. So I think this first one is probably ready to come out. So I'm going to get it on my spatula and show you what it looks like. You can see it's got a very fluffy, fragile, almost like a lacy texture there. Nice golden brown with some darker pieces. That is exactly what I love my Latkes to look like. So see how this other one's doing? Almost there on that one. And almost there on that one. All right. These are going to be so good. Now, traditionally, these are eaten with applesauce and sour cream. Applesauce is fine. Obviously, I don't happen to have any right now. But I try and avoid the substitute stuff. Like, I know that there are some plant-based sour cream alternatives out there. I'm a little leery of those because I just think I either want the real thing or I don't want it. But I've heard good things about them. So if you're inclined to try them out, by all means, you have plenty to choose from. But I like Latkes just all by themselves because honestly, what's not to like about fried potatoes? I ask you. Nothing. There is everything to like about that. So some of these are falling apart just a little bit, but most of them are holding together quite well. And even if there are ones that fall together, which I assure you happens even with non-plant-based Latkes, even if there's some that are falling apart a little bit, they're still very tasty, so don't worry. Oh, this one's perfect. Yeah. Okay, so now that we're up to a good heat, I'm going to drop it just a tiny bit, and we're going to finish making our batches here. Just a few more. Perfect. I think we got 2 more in here. And then once these are cooked, we'll move on to our frosting for the cupcakes. Okay. Beautiful. Look at all these dishes. Hooray! This will keep me busy for a while. I'll have something to do during the snowstorm. I'm going to take a little bit. Actually, I'm going to get a plate. Oh, if anything takes me back to my childhood, it is this flavor right here. It does not suffer from the lack of egg as far as flavor is concerned. So I'm going to kind of cut into it. Look at that beautiful crisp on the edge of this potato pancake. That's the good stuff right there. Oh man. It almost makes me want to cry. Not because I'm sad, but just because of the flood of memories that eating these brings back. My sisters and I were always so excited when it was time to make these. And we would hang around and like grab all of the little crispy bits that had fallen off. These are wonderful. You really cannot go wrong with basic potatoes and onions. I mean, you can't fail. I say that as I turn around, hoping that these are not burning to a crisp. They're not. In fact, they're perfect. Oh. Yeah, the second batch is always better than the first. These are very good. Very substantial, I'll grant you. And not what you would want for, a Weight Watchers light supper, but golly, I mean, it's good food. It is good, sturdy food. And in this weather especially, very comforting and very warming. And certainly, if you know the story of Hanukkah and you are eating these, you will remember how grateful we are for the gift of the oil that lasted for 8 days. Because this certainly, I don't know if there's enough oil in here to last for 8 days, but pretty happy. Oh man. I don't want to stop eating this. I don't want to do anything else now. I don't want to make the icing. I don't want to check on the pie. I just want to sit here and eat these latkes all day long. So good. So glad that I can still eat these and not have to worry about using egg. Okay. So this was 2 potatoes and half of an onion. And it turned out 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That could have probably gotten 8 out of here. It's a lot for one person. I'll have to find somebody or somebody's to share this with. But I don't think it'll be too hard to say, hey, do you want some deliciously crispy fried potato and onion? Most people are up for that. All right. So our latkes are completed. The other good thing is they cook up fast. They prepare quickly and they cook quickly. I probably would have benefited from letting this, the potatoes and onions and aquafaba sit for just a little bit longer. But even using it expediently, it still turned out really well. The inside is very tender, softer than hash browns. Outside is very crisp. It's just perfect. And I will tell you, in all the years that I have made latkes, I have never messed them up. That's how easy it is. Shredded potatoes, shredded onions, a little bit of binding agent, a little dash of flour, salt and pepper, hot oil. I've never messed it up. Not even on camera. So that's saying something. That's how foolproof a recipe and easy is it. Okay, stop eating the latkes. It's time to make frosting. I'm going to put this aquafaba back in the fridge from whence it came. Okay. And let me turn the camera back to this workspace. And now we're going to make frosting. You see we're kind of going in all directions here, but that's fine. Double check my pie. It's starting to get a little golden. Okay. So in my mixer here, I have a 1/4 cup of good, better, slightly better quality plant-based butter than what I used for the pie crust, because we're going to taste it more. This is going to be our frosting. So we want it to taste more buttery than regular margarine would do. So got that in there. And over here I have some powdered sugar. This has been softened, by the way, so that it's not ice cold, rock hard shortening and margarine. So I'm going to start beating those. And we want them to get very soft and fluffy, incorporated together there. Okay. And what I'm going to start doing, and again, just like the cocoa that we have to be very careful with when we work with it, powdered sugar, have to be very careful because it will fluff up everywhere. So I'm going to add a little bit at a time. The amount that goes in here, recipe says 1.5 cups. That is a lot of sugar. You do want it to bind together and you do want it to be sweet, but you don't want it to be overpowering. So I put in a little bit at a time, and when it starts looking like frosting, I start tasting it. And if the texture and the flavor are good, then I don't add anything else. So now that we've added the sugar, it's starting to come together a little bit better. And this is when I'm going to add the flavoring. And luckily, because it helps me remember, it's the same proportions for the frosting that it is for the cupcakes. So a teaspoon of vanilla. And a 1/2 teaspoon of peppermint. Very minty. Good thing that was the pepper, not the salt. The other thing that I'm going to get ready is green food coloring, because we have crushed red and white candy canes that will go on the top of each cupcake. So it'll be a nice little contrast to have a little bit of green frosting. And you have to be very careful with frosting, otherwise you end up with super intense colors even if you don't want to. We are hoping for sort of pastel green. We'll see what happens. So I've added the flavorings, a little bit more sugar. Scrape down the sides just as you would for anything else in a mixer, because it will kind of get attracted to the sides of the bowl, and you want to make sure all of it gets incorporated in there. Okay. And I'm also going to add just a drop. Literally, that was a drop, 1 drop of food coloring. If I need more, I'll put in more, but I don't know that I will. Woo! See? Super bright, even as it gets incorporated. Okay? And I'm also going to add just a drop or 2 of oat milk so that it softens up a little bit. We want to be able to spread it, and right now it's very stiff. This is just the right green color. It's beautiful. Not too overt. Okay, scrape that all down. Keep mixing it up. It's very much the same process as if you were making regular buttercream with butter and shortening. Beautiful. My puppy is in here wondering what the heck I'm doing, making so much noise. Put that off. And I'm just going to mix the rest of it in by hand. This bowl was a little deep to get the mixer all the way in there. So I'm just going to mix it up a little bit by hand. I could use a hand mixer, but I don't feel like getting it and plugging it in. Let me taste this and see. Wonderful mint flavor. Very buttery. Very, very good. I'm going to add a little bit more sugar. worse things to have on a flirty shirt than frosting. Feel quite sure. Get all that off. I'm going to try this in the mixer one more time since there's a little bit more sugar. If it doesn't work, we'll go back to doing it by hand. Get the sugar in there first, and then really go for it. Woo! Yes, that's good. All right, we just need a little more sugar in there so that the mixer could get all the way down there. Perfect. All right. So now we have this nice, delicate, pale green frosting. I'm going to get a knife and one of the nicer looking cupcakes that did not get stuck. So here is our naked mint chocolate cupcake. Here is our beautiful mint vanilla frosting. And here is a little dish of crushed candy canes for garnish. I am a terrible, terrible frosting person. That's the other thing. I watch this show, and there are people who are literally creating works of art with icing and frosting and decorations and piping work and things like that. You will notice as I do this, I can just barely get the icing on the cupcake. I know that if I got a piping bag, I could do it correctly, and it would be very pretty and smooth and beautiful, but I do not have a piping bag, and one of these days, if I really continue to get into the baking thing, maybe I will get one. But that's decent, right? And then we take a sprinkle of these crushed candy canes. Oh, that's so cute. It doesn't quite look like something in a magazine, but it at least looks like something I would serve to my friends. Look, isn't that pretty? And it looks very festive. So you have that pretty pale green frosting, and you have the crushed candy canes on top of that, and that is your mint chocolate cupcake. Oh, the pie. I don't know if the pie is going to be ready in time, but we'll try. Let's take a look. Almost. So the pie still needs about 10 minutes. Everything else has been cooked, but you saw the technique. I stuck a piece of latke over there. I'm sorry. My mouth is full. That's rude. It's so good though. But you saw the technique, and I will post a picture of the pie once it comes out. The recipes will be posted on the All Saints website and also on the www.plantbasedpriest website by the end of the day today. If you are in the Northeast and you are in the path of the winter storm that's coming, please be careful. Please don't drive. Please stay home and stay safe. And if you need anything, it's not snowing yet, so if you need anything, now's the time to run out and get it. But I hope that you have a safe and warm and cozy afternoon and evening and morning tomorrow morning, and that everything gets plowed in efficient, good time. You're able to keep on about your business, and I hope your business is good. Have a wonderful holiday season wherever you are and whoever you are. We'll be back after the first of the year with regular classes every week and hopefully lots of great new ideas to share. Thanks so much. Bye, everybody.